So I just share this?
Yep, and we're on. Hey everyone, how are you? How are you? It's me, Aisha Hogan from the International Academy of Universal Self-Mastery. And today on our faculty lounge, we have our guest, Alain Jean-Baptiste. Sorry, I don't have the French, the French. So Alain, tell us a little bit about you and how you work your magic.
Oh boy, we only have an hour. It's an hour, right? So, I've been doing, well, actually, mine is a particular story. Unlike most, I know some people are born with psychic abilities. I probably was myself. Probably took a car accident to get it out of me. I got a car accident when I was about 23 years old. Actually, around this time, I think it's the 15th of December, when I was 23. And I was in the hospital. I couldn't move anymore. I was paralyzed for a couple of days. And I was thinking, okay, what am I going to do now? And a friend of mine, Christelle Genot, she called and she says, listen, this guy's starting a center in NLP in Montreal. It's going to be totally new. He's on the radio. He wants to meet you. I said, well, I'll try, but it'll have to be in January because I can't move. So, it's quite funny. And I met Jean Savard was his name. It was the Centre de Neuropédagogie de la Rive-Sud. If you want anything French, that's French.
Okay, I'm not even trying to say it.
From that point on, I passed the interview, and then he hired me. And then I started working with people doing therapy here about, I'd say about 30 minutes drive, well, not drive, by a subway, Longueuil, which is just beside Montreal. And so I started, having so many clients per day, I would just go into a trance after 30 minutes, just hearing stories and stories. I think I'd have 7 or 8 clients a day, like 70, about an hour each. So you can imagine by the end of the day, my brain was overwhelmed and stuff like that. And there were some of the worst cases you could hear, rape, abuse, things you hear about the church, then business, then depression, then this, then that. And I think overall at one point, my brain just started to try to find a way to get answers much more clearly for people.
Right.
So one day I was listening to this woman, and after 40 minutes, I just looked at her and like, did you give birth at the hospital? She said, yes. I said, were there about these many people in the operating room? She said, yes. I said, well, and she had come to see me because the relationship between her and her husband was dead for like 9 years. So my mind just went straight 9 years. Actually, we didn't know it was 9 years. So my brain started seeing a movie on top of her head, detailing what was happening inside the operating room. And I said, I don't know what's going on, but does this tell you anything? I see you, I see your husband, and then it gets dark. And she just froze and she said, oh my God. She says, when my child was born, they gave it to my husband, right? And the husband, and all his wisdom, said, that's the most ugliest thing or disgusting thing I've ever seen.
Oh.
And so it was over. And it had been about 9 years that she was like this. She didn't know why. So that triggered it. And afterwards, she said, how did you know that? I said, well, me and the way I talk. I said, well, I know, just see this movie on top of your head. It's like a movie, except I don't have any popcorn. I'll always remember, because she looked at me funny and I'm like, oops. So we went out of the office. At the time I was still limping. So I would have my clients or my patients go in front of me so they wouldn't see I was limping, right? And she turned around and I turned around and she said, are you a medium? I said, well, I don't know. I didn't even know what the word was at that time.
Right.
So I researched it. And then the funny thing, she says, you know what your name means? I said, no. She says, Jean-Baptiste means he who brings the good news. And I thought, oh, that's cute. All right, nice. I'm happy because she's happy, right? So I started going to see other psychics. At the time, I've learned of this woman that was really, really good. And I started listening to them talk. And I managed to start to understand how they're processing the information in their brain. And so over time, I started using that. and started to use it in my own practice, and then teach others how to do it while I was teaching.
Because everyone has this, right? So I think that that's a really big message right now, is that everybody has the capability.
Correct, unless you really have severe brain damage. But I have clients that are like on top medication for, psychiatric medication, and they still develop their abilities. But I think overall, it's because people aren't aware that this is there. And over time, I've developed a way for people to be able to understand it in a way which most people would understand, saying that we all have more than 5 senses. And more research came out regarding that. We have remote viewing. We have the CIA spending like $20 million, on those type of programs to develop psychic soldiers. The Russians have been doing it for so long. I mean, there's so many videos out there of Russians, using it for mind control or all types of stuff. And so over time, I started realizing, hey, wait a minute, wouldn't this be fun if I can teach it to others? And in 1995, around that time, 96, AIDS had just come out, like very, very devastating, especially for the gay community. And I was starting to get, more information on that. And one day I was sleeping, and around, I think it was 4:45 or 4:45 in the morning, I get this angel or this spirit guide coming to me and asking me if I'd like to help somebody with AIDS. And me, as usual, sure, why not? All spirited, not knowing what the hell's going to come afterwards. Just like, yeah, that sounds fun. And so I did. And I called one of my students at the time, and I asked her about the dream. And she says, you're going to meet somebody in 2 weeks. And because I had trained her intuitively at the time, not as much as I train people now, because now, it's even easier and faster. But she said, you'll meet somebody in about 2 weeks, and you'll know from there. It's a woman, and then you'll know from there. So I'm like, okay, sure. So 2 weeks later, she calls me. There's this ad in the newspaper. I think it was called Voir Magazine, VOIR, if I remember, dark and really alternative type magazine. And I said, oh my God, that's her. So I go see her. She's at the hospice. This person had asked help for this woman who had AIDS. And I thought, wow, that's okay, cool. And so I went to see her at the hospice. She was in late stage AIDS, like full blown AIDS. She wasn't talking. She wasn't moving. She wasn't eating. And so over time, I explained the dream, and she thought it was cool. And I thought, okay, well, what do I do there? Honestly, I had no clue what I was doing. I thought, okay, well, I get there. I said, listen, you asked me to help. Tell me what to do, because I have no clue. So over time, I used my intuitive abilities. I spoke with her. I realized that I could read her mind since she couldn't talk, and I could actually heal, which that psychic, some of the psychics that I'd seen had told me had tremendous powers of healing. And one of them said you could heal AIDS. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Didn't understand at all, right? I didn't even understand the disease at the time.
Right.
I'm like, okay, sure, let's do it. And so I helped her over time, and she was getting better and better results. So doctors started asking me, hey, what are you doing? How come she's starting to eat, to move, to get the a sense of life back in her, and starting to eat? I said, listen, if you take blood samples so I can actually know what's going on, I'll tell you, and I'll teach you. And so I taught one of the doctors, Rabbi, I believe, I forget his last name. It's been so long. And so he was able to see at the side of the bed from the patient. Her name is Varja, V-A-R-J, no, J as in Jack, A. She was from Croatia. And he could see the spirit guides around her bed, which I had no clue were there, to be honest with you. And then I said, okay. So I taught him, and he told me that he had taken Reiki before. And I thought, oh, that's cool. And so he was able to see that as people are close to death, entities from the other side, parents, family, guides, angels, come and meet you and greet you to prepare you to go.
Right.
Totally changed his life within 6 months. Totally. His doctor had 95% rate of death. Death rate was his patients. All of a sudden, he started seeing hope. His reality started changing, and he went on to doing something else when I met him 6 months after. Because unfortunately, the patient died. At the time, we also took the wrong tests because there was test to see if you have AIDS, and there's the test to see the viral load. And so at one point I wasn't getting results. I went to the hospital, I checked the blood, and they had told me, you can't look at it this way or that way. And it showed that there was a change, and the computer was interesting. And the blood sample they had taken, the computer itself couldn't account for certain things. It would say unrecognized, or I forget what it said specifically. I said,
well, at the end of the day, it sort of means that we have the ability, like, maybe sometimes it's too late, and sometimes it's, too late in the process. Maybe, I don't know.
I think it's a perspective of understanding what is too late, because as I speak to people on the other side, I wouldn't say on a daily basis, but quite so when I help, clients, I always think there's sort of a plan. This is
where I was going to go to next. It's like for some people, it's just, that's their time.
Correct. Exactly. And we're taught to view death as something bad or something morbid, which it is. It's very painful, right? Because you get the sense of separation, and then the longing for that patience, which by definition is pain. But if you look at countries like Mexico, they celebrate the Day of the Dead, sorry, not the death. But in that sensing, when you look at it in that sensing, you start to see things that you didn't see before. And funny enough,
don't you ever notice when they have those the wakes, like when people see people in their coffins, at those, like they always have, they call it that sardonic grin, right? That look of all knowing, right? Because they do. I mean, now that that's the body, and the energy has drifted off into this other place where it's now part of what it always was part of, but now it just knows it.
Well, because the illusion of separation is only by our consciousness, right? And so it's funny you should say that, because if you think of Steve Jobs, when he was a couple of seconds before passing away, he said, "Oh my, oh my, oh my." And it's always been referred to as he was able to see heaven before he got there. And we call it heaven. Could be, something else, because even the Pope, I think John Paul II said there's no hell, which, made the Catholic world freak out. The Pope saying there's no hell, that doesn't sound too good. But
I am totally in agreement with that. I think we're beyond the time of believing there's a place of fire and brimstone. So
correct. I've never seen hell on the other side, and I've probably, talked to 1,000 people on the other side, and I've never seen death. I mean, I'm not going to look for it. I think heaven and hell is not death like being a hell. I'm not going to go actually look for it, but since I haven't seen it, I would say that, there's different levels of grades of evolution for everybody. And so what I've been able to develop from the time that I actually worked with that doctor and other doctors, because at the time of AIDS, he had suggested, go to l'hôpital, I think it was the Jewish hospital in Montreal. And I met one of the psychologists there, one of the heads of the research for AIDS. And she had said, "Oh, this is great that you're doing that. If you want, but you'll have to do it over a period of time, then get a master's degree." I'm like, "Oh my God, are you kidding me? Almost died the first time. I'm not doing this like 50 times." So I decided, you know what? The people that had most results that were concrete, that would be able for me to be able to measure and increase my own self-esteem and getting better at what I do, was business people. And so I started helping people in business, lawyers, people business in terms of negotiation, contracts, settlements, disputes. What are those called? Employee grievances or strikes. I was able to prevent maybe 6 huge strikes from major corporations.
So what are you going to be teaching inside IAUSM?
The idea here is to teach how to develop those other senses that are, I say there's about 12, there's probably 17 or even more from some research, but it's to teach people 12 senses, which are more than the 5 senses. What happens with the 5 senses are the physical senses, like sight, hearing, taste, and all those. But on a more, on a higher level or higher frequency of perception, view it as a remote control for television. We all know now we're so lazy, you just go like this, and if it doesn't get up, we get frustrated. But nobody sees the rays, nobody sees the laser beams that are going to the TV to actually change the channel. Why? Because our eyes don't see it, because it's a particular frequency.
Right.
And so outside the realm of the physical senses is the realm of imagination. If you think of people that I study over time, like Tesla, Einstein, some of the big geniuses, they all refer to having used their sense of imagination to actually view it as a vehicle to transport themselves in the future or in alternate worlds, and then deriving either mathematical formulas from there or other type of things that enables them to bring them from that reality to now. I call it the future to now. Some people call it,
Well, imagination is a powerful tool. I mean, imagination, I don't think people understand how powerful imagination is.
I think it's the definition.
Being NLP, hypnosis, like I work with it myself, and imagination is an amazing thing. And even if you think of somebody like Jose Silva, who talks about, mind control, and, it's all about getting into that alpha state of imagination. Correct. And creating on your mind screen, so to speak, anything that you want, and you can bring anything to you that you want to bring, because number one, our subconscious doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's an imagined.
Correct.
Right. And so and people use it all the time. Like they can imagine. It's interesting. So when I have clients that be like, I don't have an imagination. I'm like, how do you not have an imagination? Like, have you ever planned what you're going to have for dinner that night? You've got guests coming.
You're a product of imagination.
You're always planning. You've always using your imagination, just not like a kid. You're not playing cops and robbers, so you just using your imagination differently. So we all have an imagination. It's just, we don't realize that it's such a powerful tool.
Correct.
Of ours. And we use it for a lot of negative what if scenarios. Like, what if this happens? What if that happens?
And that's when you get anxiety, right?
Yeah, because they take themselves into the actual feelings of that made up what if. Correct. And what they don't realize is that you can use what if for positive too. Like, there's not a rule.
Well, exactly. That's what it should be used for. Okay.
Right.
But in that sensing, the difference between imagination and or use the sense of imagination is that it's a vehicle. And so when you have anxiety, what happens is that you imagine unconstructive things in the future, things that are going to be negative or bad. But what happens is that your sense of imagination, which taps into, quote, the future, because time is technically is also an illusion that we created, right, to work with. It tells you something's not right. You're not so as an example, if a client says, this will happen to me, and I'm saying, I don't see that intuitively, and they stress over it, worry over it, and it never happens. Why? Because in the future, it was never there. So as an intuitive, just to develop those abilities, a lot of the clients that I use or the members that will be using it, they'll notice that as they start using those abilities, the anxiety will lessen dramatically. Why? Because you're actually tapping into the frequency which will get you the answer and the outcome that you're looking for. And if it's not there, you just learn to accept it. If I want to move tomorrow morning or next week, I can sense intuitively, I'm not going to move out of here. Okay. When I buy properties, I'm looking in the future intuitively, and I'm sensing, and my students, I drill them so bad. What does the house look like? So yesterday, a friend of mine, Ashley, which is one of our colleagues you've probably seen on one of my shows, she's going for a house and describe the surroundings. And then I call another one of my students, and I said, okay, this is my friend wants to know if she's going to buy a house and when. And he says, by March, April, which I just told her also. And he starts describing it. And then she sends me a voicemail by Messenger saying, you're freaky, because I describe it. So she calls the promoter, and the promoter says, you know what? I only have one house left, and this is what it looks like. And it was exactly as we told them. So what we do is we tap into the future around a specific time, which comes to us through the sense of imagination. And then also through the sense of substance, then you're able to get the material stuff, like the environment, the pond, let's say, or if you want a tower, or, signs that will, like if you're near a highway is another thing. I've told people, well, I sense a highway, it's going to be on your left. There's a giant tree in front of house, or there's a post thing, it's fallen down, and you'll go somewhere and or one of my clients calls me, is from New Jersey. He says, listen, Alan, he has this New Jersey accent. Listen, Alan, I'm calling you because my wife, I can't tell her, she's going to think I'm crazy. So I did what you said. I looked in the future and I try to imagine this house as I'm going for a plumbing job. And in my head, I see a house with a blue roof in Bronx. There's no blue roofs in the Bronx. So I get there and Lord Almighty, I get on the street, Alan, and I tell you, the house has a blue roof on it. And I'm thinking, oh my God. And even Alan, I got there and I knew exactly what to do with the plumbing. I knew exactly the problem before I got there, just like you told me. And I'm laughing, not about what he's saying only, but it makes it like a movie in my head. With his accent, right? Wow, his New Jersey. So the idea is, as you learn through each sense, you build your own self-esteem. And like any superpowers, there's so many movies on superpowers and things of that sort these days. You just wonder why, right? And so the sense of balance after that is what enables you to stay sane. Because when you tell people, I speak to people on the other side, some of my members or students, some of them are Aboriginals, some of them are from other countries in Europe. To them, it's more normal, talking to people or listening to spirits or ancestors, whereas people in the North American or US or you have to start to bring them to that level of understanding first.
Well, I think, we have to understand that people they have difficulty believing in what they can't see.
Correct.
And we've been conditioned.
Correct. Exactly.
Right? We've been conditioned a certain way. So I'm going to ask you, I think you've got something's on there. I can hear some feedback. Why IAUSM? Why did you, let's bring this back to the Academy. So why IAUSM? Why did you want to bring your content and your teachings to IAUSM?
Well, I think your client base is exactly people that are looking for that material, first of all. We tend to look for people that have the same level of awareness and consciousness, and conscious leadership is a big thing when I look at somebody. Just one of my shows that I did recently, we're in the living room, Ashley and I, which work on IYL, which is another thing you'll see on the platform. It's Your Life is what it's called. Right. And then Matthew, another psychic friend of mine, and we're lingering. And what Matthew was doing is he was telling people, I'll help you. We're not going to charge. It's Christmas time, and I thought, wow, that's something. So we're looking for people that want to help others, also to generate profits. And in terms of business, that's the basic stuff. But somebody that has a vision is really what we're looking for. And I think during 2020, with the COVID-19, vision was something that people were actually had to really face. In terms of, if you didn't have a vision, then most of the companies, small companies failed. Why? Because they lack vision. Those that have been there for not only a long time, but they had a vision that what could happen over the years or decades, they were in a better positioning. And so when I saw what you were doing, and I know how hard it is to create such a website, because I used to create mine, and I'm like, oh my God. It is so
it's tough. It's tough. It's been a crazy 7 months, I have to say. For sure.
But it's worth it. Over time, if you stick with it and functions pretty well, you'll understand that it's not before the dream comes the chaos is the expression, right?
Oh yeah.
So just think of the universe, how it came to be, right? It came to be. Sorry. The idea here is, again, the people are ready for this type of material. And it's a great outlet because it's all people thinking the same way to some degree.
I think it's also people wanting to sort of step out of their stuckness.
Correct.
My new word, their stuckness. And I think the one thing that's happened because of the pandemic is that, I always equate it to people, when we lose a sense,
yes,
whether it's vision or, hearing or something, our other senses tend to they grow.
Well, focus more on them, so it allows us to develop them, which over time most people don't do. They just rely on their eyes and mostly ears. But if you work with a chef, they'll help you develop your sense of taste, your sense of touch.
So the other senses start to open up. And I think what's happened, my interpretation of what's happened is that since we've been kept apart, They've created a disconnect for us physically.
Correct.
A lot of our senses, we're not able to use them as much as we are used to using them.
Exactly.
And now our out of body senses are starting to reach out and open up and enhance. And people who don't understand that, people who don't, even if they're non-believers or they were non-believers of energy and senses and how these things work, are starting to go, wait, there's something happening to me.
Correct. And you see people that have become more depressed. I mean, if you remember, because we're in Canada, so I'm pretty sure this is worldwide, the level of alcoholism has gone up, like spiked through the roof. Drug use, pot just became legal. People are looking for ways, because what do you have to do when you're locked down? You have to stay at home. Well, stay at home means probably also get back home, get back to who you are, understanding yourself instead of, distracting yourself.
Which most people have no idea what that is.
Exactly, because we're so used to being distracted by TV. Just look at kids now. If you see a kid without a phone for more than 5 minutes, you'll probably wonder, are you okay? Why? Because it's constantly like that. Texting, Snapchat, this, that. There's so much things asking for our attention that we forget to do the work. I call it the work. So in terms of working to remind yourself that you're a human being, first of all, like Eckhart Tolle says, you're living an experience, but you have to live in the power of now, which is to recognize that.
And that's really the most, I think that's the most important thing, is that people need to be very present, and that will help them in lots of ways. Because anxiety is also, like we were talking about earlier, it's about, imagining something in the future and then getting anxious about it. And if you could just stay in the present and keep your present moment the way that you want it, you can start to find some joy maybe in your life.
Correct. And it's to recognize also that your mind is a tool. It's an instrument to create, to conceive and perceive reality at the same time. And that by doing so, sometimes we get stuck believing that the illusion that we're looking at is actually for quite real. Because at the basis of it, your beliefs create reality. And your beliefs are just beliefs. There's something you believe is real. It doesn't necessarily mean it's real, And I know some presidents that are, way out there in terms of perception, and that, it allows us to remind ourselves that at one point we delude ourselves. We get into that state of self-delusion in which we think, if I'm not shopping, or if I'm not doing this, or I'm not doing something, or I'm, my whole world's going to break. And a lot of people had anxiety at first because that was a shock that was too fast for them. And developing those abilities enabled me and my clients to be able to be prepared almost 6 months to a year in advance, so that most of them, they were ready financially, because we knew this was coming months before. The economy would go down in spring, and then October would be really, really hard, and getting there also, right? But in that sensing, does for your platform, I think it's a good way for people to have access to content that is curated in a way in which it allows them to specifically go through categories of what they're looking for to better themselves, not only over time, but for their family and friends at the same time. Because when you change, you can change the environment, and the environment, or you can change and then you change environment because you can't take it, right? So in that sensing, that's why I believe your platform was one of the best ones to put our material on.
Amazing. So if you were going to give someone, we're just going to, we can't go too long because it is Facebook. We want to keep people interested. So if you were going to give somebody like a quick tip or strategy right now that they could implement into their life, into this moment, just something quick that they could just allow them to see change and how much control they have.
You have to remind yourself that I tell all my clients that, and I've noticed so that those that don't do it, I see it immediately. You need to take 15 to 30 minutes a day, maybe once or twice, and even 20 minutes twice a day, to remind yourself to get back to yourself, to remind yourself that your tools of perception, your senses, whether there's 12 or 5 or 7 or 8, you have to get back at realizing that you need to see reality for what it is. It's an illusion. There's mathematical formula now, I've heard, for it. Okay, I'm not going to get into it, but so get back into it. Listen to your spirit guides. You know, ask yourself, how many spirit guides do I have with me at the moment? Most people will hear 3, 4, 2. And then you ask them, what is it that I can do today to better my life for the next couple of years? Or what do I need to prepare myself to be ready to help others or myself and my family for the next couple of years? So it's always about allowing yourself to receive more love. And in case you forget, just whenever things go wrong, just remember the love. That's what I tell them. Remember the love. Don't go for a position of fear and misery mentality when you're dealing with money. You have to feel, okay, well, what if I had $100,000 or $1 million? How would I act differently? Well, maybe I'd be kinder, and you know, when something doesn't go right or somebody owes me money. What if I had enough? Okay. What if that person that I'm with actually loves me and maybe I didn't perceive it properly because they're either getting triggers, like anchors, triggers going on. And then from that point on, then you move into making a choice in the decision. But remember, your senses are there to help you perceive reality and conceive it. Okay. You're not their master. They're not your slave.
Right.
Put it that way.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing today and taking the time and being part of our academy. And we love having you. And it's going to be great. It's going to be great. I'm so excited for 2021.
Oh, 2021 will be absolutely, it has the potential to create something that has never been seen before. So not in terms of just power of a person, but power as a humanity to work together.
Yes, and then that is very important, is the working together now. Thank you so much, Alain. And I will speak to you very soon.
All the success. Happy New Year.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. Have a great holiday.